Hey, I hope you're doing good. Today, I want to talk to you a little bit about what I like to call the Italian Fight Club. So if you're interested in knowing more about that, stick around. So, what did I exactly mean by the Italian Fight Club? Did you just have a bunch of adult men in a basement just punching each other? No, you had something much better. A bunch of adult men on top of a bridge punching each other. Sometimes with sticks. So if that tickles your interest, perfect. Our story begins in Venice, Italy, during the Middle Ages. There was an event known as Guerra di Cane, or War with the Sticks. And what it was, essentially, you'd have two opposing sides that were going to meet each other up on a bridge and just fight it out until you have a winner. And these fights were huge. Everybody loved them. From the commoners to nobility and some royals as well. These were events of pride for the city of Venice. All their equipment would be is just some sticks that they would boil in oil and some light armor like a wooden shield and a small chestplate. Nothing too much, but just enough to cover their bodies, I suppose. Now that you know what the events were for a while, why did they happen? Well, there's two families you can thank for that, the Nicolotti and the Castellani. These two families absolutely hated each other, and to settle their differences like normal people would, they came to a solution. They would meet up every month and just fight it out. And the people, well, they loved it. This went on from what you can call maybe a simple grudge match between these two families to a full-blown sport, with both sides having huge support. Fans, financial backing, uniforms, they pretty much had it all. And the reason behind this feud of these two families is from a supposed murder of a bishop in the San Nicolo region, where the Nicolotti resided, but some others trace it back to the civil war between the Eraclea and the Giussolo, or known as back then, Heraclea and Equiolo respectively. And if any of those sound a bit off, I apologize. These fights were super famous, but not everybody loved them. Like the government of Venice themselves. They didn't really like all the fame and reputation these fights had. I mean, they were essentially bloodbaths, so to them, saying that wasn't the best thing on their minds. So, in 1505, they came to the people of Venice with laws and regulations about these fights. And when they confronted them about it, the people of Venice just said,
No, I don't think I will.
And they pretty much ignored everything the government had to say. And the government just stayed out of their way and did pretty much nothing for, well, centuries. But it wasn't all bad for them, I suppose, because in 1585, a change occurred in these fights. One of the sides in this fight just ran out of sticks. And instead of doing what I think a normal person would, maybe retreating or admitting defeat, they just decided, no, their fists were plenty enough for this fight. And the other side, in probably what was confusion and just amazement, decided to do the exact same thing and drop their sticks as well. And that's how the birth of War of the Fists happened, or what I like to call the Italian Fight Club. And I mean, the reason they dropped the sticks in the first place is just funny enough. Just you ran out of them and still decide to keep fighting. That's pretty crazy. These fights were already quite popular, but in the 1500s and the 1600s, they exploded even more. And because of that, the people of Venice had an idea. They would essentially hold exhibition matches for all the guests that they had over. And they had guests from all over the world. From England to Japan, from duchesses to kings. They had quite the audience and they loved showing their fighters. Not everybody was a fan of them, of course. Like Henry III, he didn't really like these fights or find them interesting. And according to him, they were a bit too small to be a real war and too cruel to be a game. So he wasn't the biggest fan, to say the least. But then there were others that were completely in love with these fights, like Princess Colonna. She loved them so much, she asked they happened twice while she was over there, and the people were happy to comply with her wishes, because they loved these fights, and everybody was happy to participate in them. It was the perfect way to get fame for yourself and your boys. So nobody was going to say no to that. The best fighters even had nicknames based off their success in battles. Some of the most notable ones are Eater of Dead, Made of Steel, and Sucker of Heads. Yeah, that one is quite good. The energy of these fights swept up the entire city in its energy. It was something that brought every part of society together for a while. Now, to prepare for the fight, they sprinkled sawdust on the bridges to prevent fighters slipping off during the event. And they even cleared out water canals, and that's sometimes more effort than Italy puts in today. They even had starting lines where the fighters would wait for the fights to begin. So, the day is here, and the fighters are ready. Both sides send out their champion to warm up the crowd and the other fighters themselves. And this was quite the important moment for the fighters, since it was really important for them to show themselves well in these exhibition matches. Because how these fights worked back then, there was no quite proper judges or rules to say, because it was all on the people of Venice and their perception on what was honorable and what was cowardly. And back then, what was most important for you is to take any punch you possibly can, because dodging was a big no-no. They would not like that. So you would have to take everything that you could and still hopefully win the match. As one historian describes it, by their performance and the abuse they underwent, the fighters in effect laid claim to the public's adoration and respect. So this is pretty much how these fights went on and worked for pretty much till the end, with the biggest difference now being is that the nobility opted out of more and more out of these fights, while before they were quite the active participants as well. Now they either took leadership roles or just gamble in the fights, completely minimizing any involvement they had before. The fight stayed like this, in peace, if you can call it that, until a certain event. On September 30th, 1705, on a fight, pretty much like any other, came a surprise. A stabbing happened in the middle of the fight, which caused a real riot to ensue, and knowing how these fights go, well, normally, you can imagine that part for yourself, which made the government of Venice finally get up from its ass and try to enforce some of the laws and rules they had for the people of Venice about these fights, and made the Nicolotti and the Castellani find other, more normal ways of settling their differences, and for the people of Venice to have other pastimes that do not, hopefully, involve murder, so that the government of Venice can finally have some peace and quiet for a while. A bit of an abrupt end for our fight club, unfortunately, but that's just how these things go in history. So yeah, and this was the really short version of it, because these fights went on for, well, 4 centuries, so I can't fit all the information that exists. But if you're interested in knowing about it more, there's a book written about it by Robert Davis, so you can go check that out if you care. This whole event is so crazy and very interesting, and the only reason I know about it is from a Trash Day stream. In one of the quizzes they were doing, a question about this event popped up, and when I went to search for it on YouTube, because I'm a crippling addict that can't eat without watching YouTube videos, nothing popped up, just some irrelevant movie clips. So I decided, you know, why not? I have some free time on my hands, so might as well look it up. And here we are. I hope you enjoyed it. It's not a perfect video by any means, but I had to get it out there eventually, because this video went through multiple re-recordings and it just keeps getting worse and worse, I think. But hey, who knows, we'll see. Maybe it's good at the end. I doubt it, but hey, I hope you have a good day, and see you later. Bye!